I worked the early shift at a commuter station that most people only noticed when something went wrong. Missed signals, delays, a trespasser alert that shut everything down for 40 minutes. Otherwise, it was concrete, timetables, and people moving through on muscle memory. My role was platform coordination, not security, not operations control. I was there to observe, report, and make small corrections before they turned into bigger problems. If a train overshot its stopping mark, I logged it. If a platform announcement failed to play, I flagged it. If a passenger crossed the yellow line, I asked them to step back. Nothing dramatic. The station had 4 platforms, 2 island pairs. Trains came through every 6 to 8 minutes during peak hours. The work was repetitive enough that you learned the rhythms quickly. Doors opened in the same places. Conductors leaned out at the same angles. The same man in a gray coat always boarded the 6, 12 toward the city and stood near the 3rd car, even though it was never the least crowded. I liked that predictability. It made the anomalies obvious. The first thing I noticed wasn't something I could report. It was a discrepancy in where people stood. On platform 3, there was a painted waiting zone near the center staircase. It was clearly marked. The station had added it years ago to reduce crowding at the edges. Most commuters ignored it, but they still clustered around it loosely, as if the paint exerted some gravitational pull. Over a few mornings, I realized there was a narrow section of concrete, maybe 2 meters wide, just past the waiting zone where no one stood. Not leaned, not even stepped into while checking a phone. People walked around it without thinking. I only noticed because I had to cross it myself to reach the help point, and it felt briefly like stepping into someone else's space. I told myself it was coincidence. People respond to patterns they don't consciously register. Maybe there was a draft. Maybe the lighting was harsher there. I made a note to mention it to facilities, then forgot. A week later, during a lull between trains, I stood on that section deliberately. I was curious more than anything. I positioned myself where no one else did and waited to see if it felt different. It didn't. The platform vibrated the same way. The air smelled the same. When the next train arrived, people flowed around me without hesitation, adjusting their paths just enough to avoid contact, the way they always did. What caught my attention was the conductor. As the train slowed, he leaned out of the cab window, scanning the platform. That was standard. But when his gaze reached me, it paused. Not long, just a fraction longer than the rest. His eyes flicked down to my feet, then back up, then he pulled himself inside and completed the stop. Afterward, I checked the platform markings. There was nothing there, no stain, no repair patch, just concrete worn smooth by years of foot traffic. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention. That empty section remained empty, regardless of crowd density. Even during a service disruption, when people packed in shoulder to shoulder, the space held. Someone would drift into it briefly, then shift out without obvious reason. I started logging it privately. Time, train number, crowd conditions. It wasn't something I could justify escalating. There was no safety violation, no equipment failure, just a consistent absence. The logs didn't help. There was no pattern to who avoided the space. Age, gender, commuter regularity, nothing correlated. What did correlate was behavior when trains arrived. Conductors consistently looked at that spot. Some barely registered it. Some glanced twice. One frowned. None reacted strongly enough to comment on, but once I started watching for it, it was unmistakable. I asked one of them about it, casually, during a shift change. "Do you ever notice people standing in odd places on platform 3? I said. He shrugged. "People stand everywhere." I pressed a little, mentioned the empty patch. He looked at me for a second, then away. "Platform 3 has a weird sightline," he said. "Makes distances look off." That was plausible. The curve of the track there did distort perspective slightly. I accepted the answer and stopped asking. The next anomaly was in the announcements. Our station ran automated audio messages triggered by track circuits and scheduling software. They were pre-recorded, arrival chimes, safety reminders, service updates. If something played incorrectly, it showed up in the system logs. One morning during off-peak hours, I heard the safety message play twice in quick succession on platform 3. Same volume, same cadence. no alert in the system. I checked the log, one trigger, one playback. I chalked it up to echo or a delayed speaker. Old wiring could do strange things. It happened again the next day. Same platform, same message, always when a train approached but before it entered the station. By the fourth time, I was standing near the empty section when it happened. The first message played as expected. The second came half a second later, slightly out of sync, like a reflection. I turned toward the speakers. They were mounted evenly along the platform, none closer to me than usual. The second playback didn't quite finish. It cut off mid-sentence. The train arrived immediately after. I reported the issue. Maintenance ran diagnostics. They found nothing wrong, no duplicate triggers, no phantom signals. They suggested I might be mishearing overlapping messages from adjacent platforms. That was reasonable. Sound traveled oddly underground. I stopped pushing the issue. What I didn't stop doing was noticing where the sound seemed to come from. On platform 3, the second playback always felt closer. Not louder, just nearer, as if the voice was standing behind me instead of above. I started positioning myself away from the empty section, not out of fear, out of caution. It didn't feel appropriate to stand there anymore, like leaning against a door you weren't meant to open. The incident that forced me to document everything happened on a Thursday morning. Peak hours, full platform, I was near the staircase, monitoring crowd flow. The empty section was partially obscured by people standing around it, careful not to cross the boundary they didn't know they were respecting. A woman stepped into it. She was distracted, looking down at her phone, moving against the current. She took 2 steps into the space and stopped abruptly, like she'd hit resistance. She looked up, confused, then back down, took another step. This time she stumbled. I moved toward her instinctively. Before I reached her, she stepped back out of the space and regained her balance. Her face had gone pale. "Are you all right?" I asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just dizzy." I asked if she needed assistance. She declined and moved away, positioning herself closer to the platform edge than was advisable. When the train arrived, she boarded the first car and stood rigidly near the door, staring straight ahead. I watched the conductor. He leaned out, eyes sweeping the platform. When they reached the empty section, now empty again, he stiffened. His hand tightened on the frame. The doors closed, the train departed. I filed an incident report, framing it as a possible uneven surface causing a stumble. Facilities inspected the area later that day. They found nothing. That evening, after my shift, I pulled historical platform footage. We had cameras covering most angles, archived for 30 days. I wasn't authorized to do deep reviews, but brief checks were permitted for incident follow-up. I scrubbed back through the footage of Platform 3. The empty section was visible in every frame. People flowed around it consistently. That alone wasn't alarming. What was harder to dismiss was the way the camera behaved. The fixed camera should have shown a stable image. Instead, whenever a train approached, there was a slight distortion centered on that section. Not a blur, a compression artifact maybe, a subtle warping like heat haze. It lasted less than a second each time. I checked other platforms, no distortion. I checked older footage. The distortion appeared sporadically, then more frequently over the past few months. I saved timestamps and shut down the system, aware I was already past what I should be doing. The following Monday, Platform 3 was closed for resurfacing. The decision came from Central Operations. No explanation beyond preventive maintenance. Temporary barriers went up, rerouting passengers to other platforms. The empty section was fenced off along with the rest. I felt relieved. Whatever the issue was, it would be addressed. The resurfacing took 2 days. When the platform reopened, the concrete was new, lighter in color, the paint crisp. The waiting zone had been shifted slightly to accommodate updated safety guidelines. The empty section was gone. People stood everywhere. For a week, everything felt normal again. Conductors scanned the platform without hesitation. The announcements played once. No stumbles, no distortions on camera. I stopped thinking about it. Then, one morning, during a service delay, a train was rerouted to Platform 3 unexpectedly. I was notified late and moved to manage the crowd. As people adjusted, I noticed a familiar absence forming near the far end of the platform, not where the old section had been, about 3 meters down. It wasn't as defined at first, just a thinning, a hesitation, then a clear gap. The concrete there was new, unmarked, identical to the rest. A man stepped toward it, paused, and shifted away, frowning slightly. The safety announcement played as the train approached. Once, then again, faintly closer. I looked down at the ground, then up at the arriving train. The conductor leaned out and met my eyes directly, not at my feet, at my face. He shook his head once, almost imperceptibly, then pulled back inside. I finished my shift without incident. I requested a transfer the next day, cited personal reasons. It was approved without comment. I still use the station occasionally as a passenger. Platform 3 is operational. Trains run on time, no reported incidents. When I wait there, I stand where everyone else stands. I don't test the spaces anymore. But sometimes, when a train is approaching and the platform is quiet, I hear the announcement begin just behind me, already halfway through the sentence, like it's catching up to something I've missed.